Ahead is the summit and the east tunnel portal at the peak of our climb at 10,240 feet. The 2,550-foot-long concrete-lined tunnel was rebored in 1945 to replace a smaller timber-line bore built in 1890. The apex of our climb is actually inside the tunnel, and the Continental Divide cuts right across the tunnel. This is the highest operational mainline in the U.S. Highway 24 follows the tracks and goes over the tunnel. On the embankment along the road, we find a set of Rio Grande tunnel motors. The last unit, number 5328, is the oldest of all five, built in 1968, and it seems to have developed a problem. Fortunately, an eastbound up ahead at the Tennessee Pass siding has dropped off a pair of helpers that are now available to lend a hand. These helpers will make dragging this 8,000-ton train over the apex inside the tunnel an easier task. The westbound will now work its way past an eastbound waiting in the siding up ahead. The 10,000-foot altitude seems to emphasize the smoke that lifts straight up as the 5 units struggle up the last few hundred yards. As the westbound approaches the waiting helpers, the eastbound now has a clear main and it begins to roll down grade. AC 4400 helpers are now the mainstay helper power on the pass, and these two General Electric built units will add 274,000 pounds of tractive effort. A plus for safe train handling will also be the 160,000 pounds of dynamic brake capacity. This will come in handy to get the train down the other side with its ruling 3% grade to Minturn. Get a break with some real sunlight later on, and an eastbound manifest breaks out of the tunnel. The SD40T-2 on the point is followed by a GP60 and an SD45T-2. A Conrail and Canadian Pacific pair of leased units complete the lash up in front. Mid-train, there are no less than 4 AC 4400 helpers, adding over 17,000 horsepower to the mix. These helpers will be dropped off down at Malta. Another helper set waits on the siding to return to Minturn for another assignment. When the eastbound is clear, the automatic switch is aligned and the dwarf signal is green. It gets much tougher on the west side with a stiff 3% grade back to Minturn where the helpers are based. Before 1890 and the conversion to standard gauge, the line was even steeper with severe curves, all built on a budget by General Palmer, expanding and competing as fast as time would allow. Coping easily with a 3% grade is a pair of AC 4400s with 4 more ACs as mid-train helpers. The helpers are 50 cars back, with 39 more cars behind them. These bulkhead flat cars rolling by may look empty at a glance, but they're actually carrying heavy sheets of plate steel. These cars are maxed out with the weight of this heavy material. This is the same set of helpers that assisted the previous eastbound manifest freight over the hill when we were on the eastern side of the tunnel. Another eastbound grinds up the grade with a loaded coal train. The coal is from Arco Mine, headed to Illinois. The power on this train consists of a total of 7 AC 4400s pulling a 102-car train of over 14,000 tons. The 4-cycle diesel motors in these General Electric locomotives have a completely different sound than all the General Motors built locomotives, which all use a 2-cycle design approach. A few miles west by the timetable and north by the compass is the big curve at Mitchell. This eastbound is a Roseville, California to Kansas City manifest with 63 loads and 33 empties. The 7,000-ton train is well over a mile long. At one time, the west side was double-tracked to help cope with the problems of getting trains over such a steep grade. The Tennessee Pass route was totally under CTC control by 1928 due to the increased traffic on the line. The Rio Grande was the first railroad west of the Mississippi to use CTC. All mainline tracks on the Rio Grande were under automatic block system control by 1957. A westbound freight back at the East Tunnel portal is struggling to get over the last half mile of the 1.5% grade. The same train later on at Mitchell is running a mere 20 miles an hour, the posted limit for westbounds, to keep this train under control down the 3% western slope. Just down the line at Dean, the helper set that lifted our coal train through the tunnel's westport drifts back down grade, returning to Minturn for another assignment. This is next to Camp Hale. While chasing trains through the pass, you'll have to stop at the former location of Camp Hale, built in World War II to train troops of the 10th Mountain Division for high-altitude mountain warfare. The construction of the camp began in 1942, and housing, training, and other facilities were built in a large open field served by a spur off the Rio Grande main line. Camp Hale was named after Denver's own General Hale. Eventually, these troops faced the German army in the Italian mountains. These troops were specially trained in the use of skis, pack mules for artillery, and dogs for carrying supplies and flushing out hiding enemy troops. The 10th Mountain scattered 8 battalions of Nazi troops with the loss of 990 American men. A memorial to these men is all that remains of the camp location. Just beyond Camp Hale is Pando at milepost 288.7 with an 8,200-foot siding. We've dropped over 1,000 feet in about 7 miles. The steep 3% grade has a slight leveling off just west of Pando. This westbound St. Louis to Roseville manifest is heading for a meet at Pando Siding. It's making the allowed maximum 25 miles per hour downgrade with a pair of ACs and an SD40 tunnel motor. This is a mix that isn't seen very often. This long train of 85 cars actually took over 3 minutes to pass this location before we abbreviated it for viewing here. Braking a train of this size can be tricky on a 3% grade, so 4 rear helpers were added to bring the train down to Minturn. Until the arrival of the ACs, some heavy trains were brought down the hill in 2 sections and reassembled in Minturn up ahead for the trip westward. Down at the east end of Pando is an eastbound manifest freight waiting for the main to clear. This train is also very long and heavy, and they'll use every ounce of power to accelerate it past us in a few moments. Pando is Spanish for slow of motion, and this could be referring to the Eagle River's motion alongside the tracks, or it may even refer to the difficulty of muscling trains up this grade back in the days of steam-powered trains. In case you're wondering how they got this train up to speed so quickly up this grade, you're about to see why. The original Denver and Rio Grande extended its line west to Redcliffe by 1881 to reach additional mines. With the small town of Redcliffe in the background, we start a new day with a westbound. The crew made an unplanned stop at Pando to recharge their air supply due to the numerous brake applications coming down grade. Precautions like this are necessary to prevent mishaps and runaway trains. Just west is Belden, where the highway crosses over the tracks which enter Belden Canyon. Running east by the timetable, which is south by the compass here, is the coal train with no less than a total of 9 AC 4400 GE units in charge of this 14,500 ton train. It's hard to imagine railroading on a bigger scale than this. 3% grades, 100-car trains, and 39,600 horsepower. The spectacular highway bridge above us here is one that was built in 1940 for the U.S. Highway 24. The view from the upper bridge is the popular one for rail photographers wanting views from this high vantage point. Here, below our vantage point from the bridge, we see an eastbound manifest with a Union Pacific engine on the point, waiting for a westbound empty coal train to pass on by. It's still 25-mile-an-hour territory here in this treacherous area. Past Minturn, the speeds will pick up again. The eastbound manifest worked its way through Rock Creek Canyon a few minutes ago, and this scene points out the challenges of mountain railroading with its difficult access to many parts of the system. In 1882, the tracks ended their westward travel here to tap into mining activities. The Tennessee Pass line wasn't originally intended to be a through route until attempts to reach Grand Junction by standard gauge track were made in the Marshall Pass route to Gunnison, Black Canyon, and Montrose. This effort had too many problems to overcome, and the Tennessee Pass line was chosen for standard gauging instead. The line was completed from here to Glenwood Springs in 1886. The Marshall Pass route was abandoned by 1955, and the Black Canyon and other track segments now lie under the water of the Blue Mesa Reservoir. As difficult as the Tennessee Pass proved to be, it was still the best choice available and has served well up to present times. We're at the east end of the Minturn siding, and we'll look at the yard there in a minute. But first, we want to show you number 7312 and Company dig out of the hole up the 3% grade ahead of it. It's quite a show. This train seemed to be put into every siding as it worked its way eastward. The crew had a very long day before reaching Pueblo. These 6 AC 4400s are nearly back to Minturn Yard, where they'll wait again for the next eastbound big enough to require their help. Minturn was named after the DNRG Vice President Thomas Minturn. This location is the western end of Subdivision 4, the eastern end of Subdivision 3, and a crew change point. This is also where helpers are removed on westbounds and added on eastbounds. This yard shares cramped quarters with Highway 24, the small town of Minturn, and the Eagle River. At one time, heavy westbound taconite trains were reassembled here after being broken into 2 trains back in Pueblo. They now send the 100-car trains over in one unit since using the giant AC 4400s as helpers.